Because the second CFP rankings were released last night, and there wasn't a lot of drama. No changes in the top five. Texas Tech jumps from 8 to 6 after the win over BYU, which falls all the way down to 12. Miami is now the highest-ranked ACC team at 15. South Florida leads the group of five at 24. So every week after these rankings, we bring on Heather and Paul to go through the release of the rankings and what they mean. Let's start with Heather Dinich, who knows more about this than anyone else knows about anything. What are the three things that fans should know that came out of the rankings last night that matter?
Greeny, I think it starts with how much the eye test weighed in that room from top to bottom in this ranking. Because when you see Indiana still maintaining that spot over Texas A&M, they lead the country in strength of record. They have a better strength of schedule, but people in that room appreciated how Indiana won at Penn State. Their quarterback, Fernando Mendoza, basically willing them to a win in the fourth quarter. You can also see evidence of the eye test with how far BYU dropped because of how they lost to Texas Tech. The other thing I think that's important about this week's ranking is when you look at that bunch of two-loss teams, Notre Dame, Texas, and Oklahoma. At 10, Texas appears to have the most margin for error simply because they have the best opportunities of any team in the country to impress the committee, starting on Saturday against Georgia, but also in the regular season finale against Texas A&M. That's two top five opponents. If they split those games and finish with 3 losses, I think they're at least still in the conversation, in the debate. And then finally, Greeny, I'm going to just pump the brakes on this nightmare scenario of the ACC being left out of the playoff entirely. That could happen if Duke wins the ACC. It would be a 4-loss team. James Madison wins the Sun Belt. Then what do they do? It's a fair question, but I think it's highly unlikely because JMU wasn't ranked. South Florida is the G5 representative right now, and James Madison's strength of schedule, 115 in the country, I think is going to keep them out, at least right now.
Fascinating. Okay, so perfect setting of the table there. Paul, let's dive into some of these things. Let's start with Texas. 3-loss teams don't traditionally play for the championship, but it obviously can happen. They have looked like an entirely different team. If they lose this weekend, will you still consider them, Paul, a playoff team?
Yes, if, of course, they do what Heather alluded to and beat Texas A&M at the end of the season. That would be one of the best wins of the year. And I know you don't get in the playoff because you have good losses, but tell me, America, who has a better loss than Texas? A 7-point game at Ohio State in the opening weekend of the year. We thought it was terrible, but in the end, it may have been a pretty decent performance, all things considered. Now, they were the #1 team in the country at the time, but I think they would dwarf anyone else for consideration with 3 losses, and quite frankly, quite a few with 2 because of their schedule. The one glaring error for them, they lost at Florida. That is going to haunt them otherwise.
In the SEC, and there's so much talk about the conferences and how they'll break down and who gets in and all those sorts of things. At the end of the day, Paul, how many SEC teams do you believe are worthy of being in the play? How many SEC teams should they, right now off the top of your head, how many teams do you think should wind up getting in?
I think fairly right now we're talking about 5. It could go to 6 now. I know some of my brethren think it ought to go to 16. But realistically, Texas is the wild card. I mean, we know right now that Alabama, Georgia, A&M, Ole Miss seem to be locks. Texas, Oklahoma beats Alabama, then they're under consideration. If they lose that game Saturday, they're gone. And well, there's one more team to think about, and that's Vanderbilt. Yes, I said it. Vanderbilt could end up 10-2 with a last weekend win at Tennessee. They'll be on the bubble.
And then, Heather, lastly for you, game day is at Notre Dame and Pitt this weekend. Is this a must-win for Notre Dame?
Absolutely. Nothing has changed for the Irish. They've got to finish 10-2. They don't have a conference championship game to compensate for another loss. So these guys have to get it done against a Pitt team that has nothing to lose and might be playing the best ball right now in the ACC.
Okay, Heather and Paul, every week after these rankings come out to make sure you know exactly what it all means. Guys, thank you. We'll check in as the week continues.
You want this, you got that. No way, watch them walk right past you. Run fast while you have the chance. Don't speak, let them look right at you.